Steve's taken down the little intro. Oh dear, this is too many cooks spoiling the broth. Anyway, welcome. Whatever time of day you've got, wherever you are, you've tuned in to FreeThought Hour with John Richards and my co-host, Tercia Duplessis. Tercia, we were worried that you were going to miss it through load shedding.
No. I'm not load shedding. I've been extremely busy. I'm moving office. It's like moving house. I'm setting up my Edu studio space with my partner, and it's my Hanu just helped me to set up with seconds to spare. Well, hello, John. Welcome to your show.
Well, yes, we've all been there and done that. So let's introduce we've got two guests today. We've got David Orenstein, who's hello there. How the devil are you?
The devil is treating me well. Thank you. Tercia, I love your hair. What do you have in your hair?
Oh, John can explain it to you. It's actually a piece of silk. It's a silk scarf that I've plaited into my hair.
Oh, it's lovely.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Sure.
so much. Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Appreciate.
Sure.
She's embarrassed now.
John, I like your hair too. I know.
Thank you. I reciprocate. And we also have Scott Weigold from over in California. How the devil are you, Scott?
The devil and I are doing fine.
Good. Excellent. So,
David,
thank you for joining
like
us.
Scott's hair as well?
Yes, I like everyone's hair. I like my hair in the past tense as I get older and I get less of it.
So the idea behind this evening is to get to pick your brains, guys, on the subjects of proof, belief, and knowledge, because I want to crush those two together, and truth, because these are all fairly ambiguous terms, aren't they? They have multiple meanings, and this can lead to some quite high levels of misunderstanding when we're using them to try and communicate. So let's start with truth. Now, I've made myself a document which puts down my thoughts on the matter, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. What do you think truth is? Who's going to go first?
Scott, I'll arm wrestle you for it.
Let's see. I think probably I would start with truth is an accurate understanding of what is out there. I don't know that we can achieve that because our senses get in the way, etc. But I think maybe I would start with that and then see what other people have to say and probably end up adjusting that some.
So that's what you might call the correspondence theory of truth, isn't it?
Well, not exactly.
No?
Because I'm not asking for it to correspond with anything. Simply that it is what is out there.
Well,
I don't know why that happened. Sorry. No. Fighting my phone. Carry on. Sorry.
I was just saying, I'm not sure if it's correspondence. I'm simply suggesting the truth is whatever is actually out there.
Can I ask something? Would it be fair to say that you basically agree with Matt Delahanty's definition that truth is that which comports with reality? And would that be then the correspondence? I suppose it would. Truth is that which comports with reality. Is that also a type of correspondence, John? And Scott, have a problem with that as a definition of truth? Or would you like to adapt it as a definition of truth?
If I may, I'm not trained as a philosopher. I'm trained as a scientist. I'm trained as an anthropologist. So, when I think of truth, I think of it as something that truth is based not on opinion, but is based on some sort of reasonable, provable evidence. That is, that we use not only our senses to figure things out, but that we use what we know as facts. The problem is that truth, like facts, can change over time. Now, that doesn't mean that truth in the past was necessarily bad. It just means that it wasn't as close to reality as we know it is now. And that, I think of, my religious friends, or, will say that their truth comes from scripture. And as an atheist and a non-believer and as a humanist, I reject that truth because it's not truth, it's opinion. And since opinion can't be truth, then it has to be fulfilled by some other mechanism found in nature that we could use science to define it.
I like that. Frank, thanks for watching. He's come up with truth is that which is so. Whether or not anyone knows it, and even if nobody even can know it, knowledge of truth and truth itself per se are not the same things.
Yeah, yes, I think that's closer to my point.
I like that. I love that definition, Frank. I want to have that as a quote. I love that. Truth is that which is so, regardless of whether anybody knows it or can know it. I love that. That's brilliant. Don't you guys think so?
Yes, indeed. Yes, yeah. It's not affected by human brains. It just is.
Right.
Right. One of my favorite quotes about science is that science provides us an asymptotic approach to truth.
Right.
And that suggests that truth is simply whatever is. And knowledge then becomes something about how close we can match our understanding to what is out there, which is more about the correspondence.
Yeah, I like that because it makes the point that what goes on inside our heads is separate from the rest of the cosmos.
Right.
And it need not correspond, and there's no limit to what ideas we can conceive, and the best we can do is make models that we hold up against reality, and see whether they fit.
Sort of an approximation of what truth is, or as there's in the United States, there used to be a comedian who had a show called The Daily Show, Jon Stewart, who used to talk about truthiness. That that it's not that something is that there might be a truth in something, but it is not actually true. So you can almost put truth on a bell curve of reality based on demographics, time, philosophy, and so on and so forth.
Well, we got Jon Stewart over here, and he was brilliant. We loved him. It's a shame that his show ever ended. But
now I'm going to challenge your knowledge of that, since it was actually Stephen Colbert who used the term truthiness.
Okay.
In reference, and of course, he started on Jon Stewart's show.
Right.
But yes, he was referring to political arguments that feel right, whether or not they have any basis whatsoever in reality.
Right. Right. So you see, my truth has now been upgraded thanks to Scott, because I attributed it to John Stewart, who it wasn't.
Right. Well, it's been changed. You don't know if
Right.
It's always very difficult to find the originator of these sayings.
Right. Exactly.
One of the
Tertia.
things I wanted to say, one of the things that I have the greatest problem with is this new idea, and I don't know if it's postmodernist or not, that there's such a thing as my truth and your truth.
Right.
It's something that upsets me so much. I think I understand that people, what they try to say is there's my experience of reality and there's your experience of reality. But that has no effect on truth. There's such a thing as your truth or my truth. There's just truth. And I think the idea that people want to convey is my experience of reality is different to your experience of reality. But now they've been using the word truth as a placeholder or as a replacement for my experience of reality, because my experience of reality is not necessarily the truth.
Right. It's experiential. So in other words, and I'll quote another comedian, Ricky Gervais, who I think said, it used to be the argument was my fact against your fact. Now it's my fact against your opinion as being equal, when in fact cannot be equal to opinion. Opinion is experiential or comes from some other device of the mind through experience, and that there are, so are we talking about one truth now, or are we talking about multiple truths? Well, then how is anything true? Except I know that there are some truths in the world, right? There are physical truths. So I can't, I live in a home with 3 floors. I can't reasonably expect to go out my window from the 3rd floor, right? And float down, right? So there is a truth. There's gravity, right? There is a truth. We have biological evolution. There is a truth of germ theory there, because we've gained that knowledge. And to your point about what is knowledge, well, that is not necessarily the discovery, but the uncovery of facts that the universe has already set in a godless universe has already put in motion, that we humans with our little brains have finally figured out.
Well, before we go down any of the rabbit holes that have just opened up,
sorry.
Well, no, I'm not blaming anybody. It's interesting stuff, like having different perspectives on truth, which might simply depend upon your geographical location and where your eyes are looking from. And before we go down that one, or what we actually mean by facts, I'd like you to take a look at this little video, which is what Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say on the subject of truth. Are you ready? Here we go.
I have thought a lot about this. Yes. And I've concluded there are 3 truths. Sorry, there are 3 kinds of truths, not 3 answers.
Okay.
One kind of truth is an objective truth. This is what is researched and established by the methods and tools of science. This is what is true, whether or not you believe in it. It's how we make electricity work. It's how the physics of your cars you drive works. It's how Earth moves around the sun. It's how energy from the sun powers the ecosystem and the biosphere.
You can't argue this.
Those are objective truths. You can argue it, but it won't matter if you argue it.
Right.
It's true whether or not you argue it.
It's your
Okay, so now,
physicist section in the bookstore.
Correct. Second kind of truth. It's a personal truth. These are truths that are true to you. They are true down to your bones. Jesus is your Savior. Muhammad is your prophet. You know this is true no matter what. And no one is going to take it from you, at least not in a free society. No one is going to take that from you.
Okay.
Our religion and our faiths and our beliefs in our faiths are constitutionally protected conduct of American citizens. It's what attracted so many immigrants over the decades, where the religion was persecuted where they were, and they come here and they knew they wouldn't be persecuted. Okay. Hence the religious melting pot that we actually are. Okay. So that's your truth, but watch what happens. The only way you can get me to share that truth is by some intense bout of persuasion or by threat of force, violence, or death. I have a different personal truth than you. Do you require that I share your personal truth? We will go to war over that. You know why? Because my personal truth tells me that your personal truth is false. Most religions, most monotheistic, the great monotheistic religions, have as part of their tenet that other religions are false.
Right.
So each one says the other one is false. And curiously, our country protects that. It allows you to say that your belief is true and everyone else is false, and it allows me to say the same damn thing about you. So you live in a...
There you go. That's his view. He's come up with the idea of personal truth. And he's come up with the different sort of truth, which sounded like scientific truth to me. What do you say? What do you think?
Can I be extremely presumptuous? Who am I to criticize somebody the likes of Neil deGrasse Tyson? And I think, once again, I understand what he means. But to talk of a personal truth is just misleading. There's no such thing as a personal truth or a scientific truth. Not in my... I think it's dangerous, because if you attach the word truth to an adjective like personal, then you've given that adjective a value that it shouldn't have. And it confuses, it muddies the waters, because it's not clear speech. There's no such thing as personal truth. There's such a thing as a personal belief. And we have the right.
Challenge that.
We have the right to hold our personal beliefs. But we don't have the right to hold personal truths, because if my personal truth is that white people are better than black people, then I can't hold that. It's not a truth. It's my personal belief, and I think we need to get the language right.
Well, I've got to disagree with you on two accounts there, Tercia. Firstly, I think it's perfectly okay to question and to be presumptive about Neil's opinion, because he's only expressing an opinion.
Right.
And what we shouldn't do is respect authority of that sort. What we should do is criticize ideas. And so I'm going to disagree with you on that. But I also want to disagree with you about there being two sorts of truths, personal and what you might call scientific or empirical. Because I think that in the context of a lifetime, and I think Scott mentioned something about this earlier on, we can have personal truths, like, for example, I was born on the 4th of May, and that's relevant to me, especially while I'm alive, because I might want, birthday celebrations and presents. But that sort of personal truth is completely irrelevant in the greater scheme of things. It doesn't, in the old saying, it butters no parsnips, because the cosmos has no interest in my birthday.
But John, I want to push back a little bit, because the fact that you were born, when did you say you were born? I wasn't.
I made up a
saying-
date.
All right. So that is, it's a universal truth. The value of that truth may be personal to you and to those who love you, but it's not a personal truth. It has personal value as a truth to you.
Okay.
But it's still a universal truth that the man that we know as John Richards was born on that day in that place to that woman and fathered by that man. And that's a truth.
It is.
I don't know.
But okay, maybe I didn't express it properly. It is a truth, especially during my lifetime. It will disappear disappear when I die, and it had no significance before I was born. So what I'm trying to say here is that there are some sorts of truths that are cosmological, and there are other truths which are very temporal and therefore much less significant. I'll use significant, you called it value, than the major truths about the material surroundings.
So maybe we're mixing up terms here, right? Because what you're saying is I can give you a truth of I was born or I was born. Maybe we're really talking about facts and not truth, right? And you can say that truth then is the accumulation of facts that we can understand within the context of the time that we're on this planet, right? So, facts can change, right? We know that there is the truth of evolution, but the facts that make up that truth change with every new fossil discovery.
Ooh, I don't like that. I don't want my facts.
Scott,
I don't want my facts to change.
Well, no, the facts change in that the truth is the global thing, right? Evolution is real, and humans evolved from other species, right? But what happens is that the more we understand and find more fossils, that truth becomes clearer because we have more evidence, we have more facts to support that truth. Is my point.
Can I ask, has anybody here listened to the very first conversation that Sam Harris had with Jordan Peterson? So those who are interested, I've actually spent months, literally months, because it was so tedious, transcribing that conversation because it wasn't on YouTube. So it was only available as an audio podcast. And the thing that Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson got stuck on for almost 2 hours was the nature of truth. And of course, you can imagine that they had quite a difference. And one of the examples that Sam Harris used to explain his view or to clarify his view on truth, and I agree with that, was the idea that I'm not sure what the language and the difference between truth and facts are. So he used the example of knowing how to synthesize the smallpox virus to turn it into a biological weapon. There's a factual truth and there's knowledge about how to take that virus, how the virus replicates, how you can put it in a device to destroy mankind. And Jordan Peterson was saying that that's not true, because if you use it to do harm, then it's not true in a, whatever this might mean, a Darwinian sense, which is totally nonsense to me. And Sam Harris said, it doesn't matter whether you do that to do good or to harm or by accident. The fact is, it takes certain chemistry and biological knowledge to synthesize the smallpox virus. Smallpox is a virus, and this is how it works. And we may learn more things and we may learn new things, but that essential fact that smallpox is a disease caused by a virus. and that certain things can be done to manipulate that virus. That is true, regardless of whether you and I believe it, whether we use that knowledge for good or evil. And that's the concept of truth that I would like to go with.
I want to hear from Scott. Scott, what do you think a fact is? How would you define a fact?
Was not ready for that one.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
Your hair looks nice.
Well, so I'm gonna diverge from John's question. Please remind me to get back to it.
Okay.
You said my hair looks nice. That is no. So that is an opinion, but is it a truth that you hold that opinion? No, I'm serious. I think this is.
Yes, it's true that I hold that opinion.
Right. That's my version. That's my explanation of personal truth. So it is true. I'm not sure I believe that it's true that you like my hair, but.
Are you questioning me? Are you saying I'm a liar? Is that a fact?
So I don't like tomatoes. Now, my opinion about the taste of tomatoes is an opinion, a preference. But it is my personal truth. It is absolutely true, and it affects my life, and it affects what people around me offer me as food once they know about that personal truth. My English teacher in my junior year of high school, I think she was a genius. I think she was absolutely wonderful at her job. Not everybody else thinks so, but it is true that I hold that opinion, and it is true that I still hold that opinion 43 years later. Mm-hmm. So that is
that old?
I beg your pardon?
Is it a fact that you're that old?
According to the date on my birth certificate, which I think we'll all accept as a fact at this point, yes. So, I mean, that has been a personal truth of mine, absolutely consistent for, what did I say, 43 years. That is not a truth that is out there. That is not a truth that anybody else can verify. That's not a truth that anybody can measure. It is absolutely impervious to empirical inquiry, right?
But is it not then just an opinion?
My opinion about her, absolutely. My feeling that she was a great teacher is an opinion. But the fact that I hold that opinion is true.
Yes.
And so if when we take this out of controversial areas like religion or race relations, politics, we find that this kind of idea works just fine. And we actually use it in our daily life all the time.
Are we going to get back to facts?
No.
Because, well, I'm going to do my view of facts, because I don't want them to be changeable. Right. I want facts to be fixed, and the closest thing we can get to fixed, indisputable, incontrovertible fact is shareable, repeatable observations.
Well, I mean, when I was in high school, and again, you have to think about how many years ago this was, the fact, at least as it was printed in my biology textbook, which probably had information that was already 10 years obsolete, but the fact I was taught, and I had to put down on exam papers, was that a cell membrane was a lipid-protein-lipid sandwich. We were not taught that It is a lipid bilayer with islands of proteins performing functions that we now understand. Now, like I say, researchers probably knew this was true at the same time that I was being taught this fact. But at some time earlier, the textbook was based on facts as they were known at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So in that
John,
fact has changed.
I'm sorry to, Scott, you might need to do some counseling, but John, I'm afraid that facts do change because, and David, you've said something like that. We might, depending on our methods of observation, new facts might emerge. So,
yes, but
and I think that's what David meant when he said we might have a certain idea of where Homo sapiens fits into the fossil record. And then a new fossil, a new observation can alter our interpretation of the data. And then it effectively becomes a new fact or a different fact.
It doesn't change the global truth.
Yes.
Right. So for me, a fact is something that, as John, as you mentioned, is measurable, is testable. It is in the material world that that is shaped by the human methods that we have created in the last 100 years only. You know, we've been around for 350,000 years, and you know, we've only figured out as much as we've had in terms of real true science in the last 150 of those years. So we are still trying to figure our shit out. And we haven't, it would be foolish to think, it would be religious to think that facts are immutable. It would be foolish to think that facts don't change, because in reality, they do when we get more evidence and we uncover more truth about the way the universe works.
Well,
Facts are what we know now.
Yes, exactly. I don't think that anybody's said anything here that contradicts my desire to have facts fixed, because what you've done is you've altered the playing field.
No, I don't think that's what was said at all.
Mm-hmm.
The facts, what I think all three of us have said, is that facts absolutely do change. They are not fixed. The truth of what's out there doesn't change.
Right.
The facts that we know, that we write down, that we teach to each other, absolutely do change. Mm-hmm. As in the case of my cell membrane example, mm-hmm. Which goes to show something of the value of my freshman high school biology teacher, that I still remember that lesson.
Yeah, well, okay, let's play with that playing field. That fact depends on the technology used to identify it at the time. And let's, at that time, it might have been, I don't know, light microscopes and methods, centrifuges for disrupting cells, and I don't know what was used at that time.
But we were just banging rocks on sticks, that's it.
Yes. But the point is, if you use that level of scrutiny, you should still get the same observations repeatedly, and you should be able to share them. And so that fact hasn't changed. What we've got is more information from new means of investigating.
There's a question that I think needs answering. How do you define?
I think that's semantics. I'm sorry for interrupting, but John, I think you're playing a semantic game now, because I think, regardless of, because I think we're all in agreement here, for better or worse. But your point is, you know, what you're calling a discovery or a better discovery, we're saying is an improved fact. And so we're really talking about semantics here, because the truth is that the truth is better informed once we have these new discoveries, as you said, John. And once, as everyone else said, we have these better facts because we've learned something about how the cells work that we didn't see before, or we've added knowledge to the fossil record, which gives us a clearer picture of the truth.
I'm comfortable with more facts, with better facts, but I still don't think you've destroyed the original factiness of that, that first discovery by whatever means it was made.
The fact is that Tertius hair is beautiful. And that's the only fact I know.
I agree. I agree with that fact. It's a universal.
There you go. You see, as deGrasse Tyson said, that is my personal truth.
Well, no, it's a universal truth. I don't think it's a personal.
That's right. It's an objective truth. There's no one on the planet who is looking at this podcast now, or who will look in the future, who will say that tertiary hair is not beautiful.
So what is the value? What is the value of that fact?
Okay.
Does the rest of the universe care?
Well, for Tertia, I hope it means something really important.
It means
for the rest of us.
It touches my heart. It makes my life better. I promise you, it's amazing to know. But okay, I think we need to change the topic now. I think we need to answer that question about how would you define truth or fact. And I want to plug in to what David said about playing with semantics, because I'm I'm not a linguist, but as a person who's interested in language and who is very interested in how language operates in the world, I think one of the sorry, I'm just laughing at the comments. PRC Temp 1, that's fine. I can live with that too. So I think semantics really plays into this, because and I think it's not so much a question of semantics, it's a question of that I've said this so many times. The problem with human language is that with human communication and with human language is that we think it's successful. We are limited by the words that we use. Now, I'm not. Am I the only person in this chat who is at least bilingual? Is there anybody else who speaks another language? Besides David, do you speak another language?
Brooklynese. That's about it.
I'm barely monolingual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're really talking about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That is that the number of words that someone uses in their in their language complex, in their personal cultural dictionary, defines their reality, right? So the fewer words you have, the less you can know about reality, right? Because your lexicon is either large or small, and that defines your reality.
No, I don't. Well, I don't know about that hypothesis, but I'm not trying to say that. To me, it's not about the number of words that you have in your vocabulary. It's about the fact that different languages have different ways of expressing the same things. And as somebody who speaks Afrikaans, and I have a very large Afrikaans vocabulary, which is a Dutch originated language, but I also speak English relatively fluently sometimes when I'm in a good place. And what I often find is that there are situations where I can express myself more clearly in Afrikaans language, and at other times I find that there's things I have to say in English, and that experience. Frank, yes, I think speaking mathematics does count, because I think is the only universal language. And I'm sorry to say that I don't speak mathematics very well. But what I find is that it's not about the size of the vocabulary. There's an influence in how you express in different languages. For example, in Afrikaans, we don't have the distinction between faith and belief that exists in English. There's just one word. And talking about religion in Afrikaans is completely different in many ways to talking about religion in English, because of the one fact, and that's just one example, that you can make the distinction between faith and belief, which you don't have in Afrikaans. So, and it's not because I don't. It's because there's not a distinction. So when we talk about things like truth and facts, I often find the same thing. And that's why I think we need to be very clear about how do we define a fact and how do we define the truth. And then we haven't even spoken about, is it capital T truth, you know? So it's discussions that I think need to be had. And maybe everybody should just learn English, and we should just make sure that everybody understands English.
So we've failed to iron out what we mean by truth. But a lot of talk has come up about knowledge. So what do we think knowledge is? Anyone want to have a go at knowledge?
Well, if you use the old saw that knowledge is justified true belief, there are obviously three parts to that. Is it justified? Is there sufficient evidence to hold this idea that it's true, that this idea you hold does actually comport with reality? And do you hold this idea steadfastly? That's
whatever that means. Whatever steadfastly means. Yes. I'm not a fan of the justified true belief definition.
I've become less enamored myself, but it's a place to start.
Yes, indeed. The reason I'm not a fan is it elevates belief to an unreasonable level of importance. And the modern usage of the word knowledge doesn't refer to belief at all. If you think about how, the general public, not academics specifically, use knowledge, they think of it as something that's much more solid than belief. And if you get into a discussion, they will say, this is not my belief, this is knowledge. And they will distinguish between those two rather than linking them together.
But that's true with almost any idea, almost any term, when you're talking about the difference between sort of the average public use of the word and an academic or researcher's use of the term. Look at the word theory. It means something very, very different on the street than it means to David.
Sure. But in this particular case, it seems to me that knowledge is in the ascendant and belief is in the descendant, because historically, believing was of paramount importance to the lives of people. Beliefs were the only sources of information that we had, and religions provided those beliefs. But in the last, let's say, 150 years, scientific knowledge has taken over and supplanted those beliefs with a stronger, more concrete sort of information. And not only that, but the method of science has taught us that things are not polar. They're not true or untrue. They are fuzzy. And we're talking about probabilities now.
That's right.
Okay. I think I can give you what I would say is the David Orenstein definition for right or wrong. And that is, and I wrote this down, so it's the knowledge is the accumulation of material facts that make up our understanding of reality. And what I mean, the idea of accumulation here is, to me, the most key word, because when you're 5 years old, you believe in Santa Claus, right? When you're 60 years old, right, you still believe in Santa. No, I'm kidding.
Oh no!
You as you grow, you accumulate facts. Now, if they're metaphysical facts, then they can't be truthful. Their opinion, their personal facts. But if they're material facts, then they equal knowledge of the material world. So it's the accumulation of material facts, which is the definition of knowledge. Because the more you know, about the nature and reality of the universe, the more you know is true.
Anyone?
Can I want to say two things. I see my friend Barend van der Merwe is on, and I have no idea who Sappher and Wolf are, so I have to make a mental note. I don't know if any of you guys know.
Okay, they're two linguists. They independently came to this same theory. So they didn't work on this together, but they came to the same conclusions that your reality is shaped by the amount of words that you can make into sentences to understand reality, and that changes from culture to culture.
Okay, cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Here's me thinking they were characters in Star Trek.
No, you're thinking Beale and Loci.
Oh, okay.
But I like learning new things. I like gaining new knowledge. So I have new knowledge. But I also want to respond to Frank's comment. Knowledge is what we think is true, some of which is true, and some of what we have learned is not actually true. So we're still a little bit stuck with these distinctions between truth and facts, and the only sensible thing I can say at this stage is that we have to remember that what we think we know is not as important as being aware that we often don't know what we don't know. So there's this pie chart where you have the things that you know, things that you know you don't know, and then things that you don't even know that you don't know. So you don't know that you don't know. And so I think, and I'm no philosopher and I don't speak maths, and I try to live with my feet firmly planted on terra firma. And I think sometimes we get bogged down in definitions that are not really necessary, in the sense that, do we really have to distinguish between knowledge and facts? Don't we sometimes just overcomplicate things in terms of, we know certain things, and we should ask, how do we know what we think we know? And then we have to be open to the fact that we might be wrong. We have to be open to understanding that new methods of observation might change what we know, and that we're always, in as far as knowledge and facts are concerned, in to a greater or lesser extent in movement, because depending on methods of observation, depending on the mountains of knowledge that we built on, the little top might change, like you said, David, and that's where, that to me is the distinction, that truth are those things we can build on without the top parts falling away from underneath us. Where knowledge are those is the part where knowledge and facts. And what would you say if I said, I think that we can use knowledge and facts almost as synonym? Oh, I'm almost too scared to say this, but can't we sort of use them as having more or less the same meaning?
I think in 90% of our daily lives, they are pretty close to interchangeable. It's only when we get down to where things are fuzzy that it becomes a very, very important issue.
Here's where I think there's a difference between belief and knowledge. I think that a belief has to come as a result of some mental consideration. You have to make a judgment as to whether the evidence and arguments are weighty enough for that item of information to warrant believing. But knowledge doesn't. Knowledge is so firm that, like David was saying, he's not going to jump out of his third floor window. Knowledge is so firm, it doesn't need that consideration. It's known.
If I may, a very good friend of mine many years ago told me, as a rationalist, to move away from the idea that anything that is fact-based is even a belief. That instead of, and this is where semantics comes in, you might want to change the word "I believe this is happening" to "I conclude that this is happening."
Yes.
Because if you use the word conclude, then it's based on some evidence of fact. But if you say you believe something, right? Yeah. I believe in God, right? Someone says that. Well, they base that not on the fact that there's evidence for God, but because they've been taught that, or they read the Bible and there's no material evidence. However, I can conclude that, the boiling point of water is X, and I can conclude that if I turn my light on, if I've paid my electric bill, the light will go on unless there's something that happens to the switch. So there's a difference between, I stopped when I'm talking about facts, anything fact-based, I never use the word belief. I say I conclude that this is the case.
Can I jump in
Please.
here? And I want to say that I agree 100% with James Apperson in his comment. I also prefer, instead of saying I conclude, I prefer to say I accept the evidence that this is true. For example, I never say to somebody, I believe in the theory of evolution. Right. I say, I accept the theory of evolution. And so once again, funny enough, it's about words, because if and when it comes to belief, beliefs are deeply personal. Right. And beliefs are, and Scott, you as a psychiatrist will know this, I think, more than the rest of us, although we all have experienced that. Beliefs are very, very deeply attached to our visceral emotional responses. And we don't like to have our beliefs challenged. And in everyday life, for most of us, what we believe and what we believe to know are very much intertwined. So most people don't make any distinction between belief and knowledge in their daily lives. That's why you get the Baptists who say, if you ask them, why do you believe in God? Then they say, I know because I know that Jesus loves me. So most people, I would, I'll put it out there, most of us don't think about, do I know this? Or do I believe this? Or do I know that I believe this? We don't make those distinctions in everyday life. And that's another reason why I think we need to focus on how we express ourselves, especially when we want to communicate about science.
Well, there you are. You're discriminating between know and believe, which I thoroughly applaud, and I'd like to meet your friend, David, because what you reported him as saying completely agrees with my opinion, which is that the word belief should be reserved for propositions that are known to be dubious. Like Tertia was saying.
Yes.
I like that.
These are propositions that a person may have just willfully chosen to accept, such as, I believe my horse will win.
Okay, but let me make. I mean, you can use belief in a safe way. Like I believe we all have human rights, right? That is a belief based on the fact that if we treat each other with kindness and humanistic values, that the world will be a better place. That is my conclusion based on my belief. So if you challenge that belief, right, that's an opinion versus an opinion, right? Because you're talking about a belief. However, if you challenge evolution, you're not challenging my beliefs anymore. You're challenging my conclusions, because
Yes.
my conclusions are based on fact. My beliefs are based on my experiential evidence of what I understand to be true.
What would you say, gentlemen, if I said that everything we know started out as a belief, but as the evidence mounts, belief can become a fact and it can become something that we know. So, and depending on what the circumstances are and what the individual example is, uh, we begin by believing things about reality, and then if there's enough evidence, then belief can become knowledge. What would you say to that?
I don't like that because it implies that there's a route from belief to knowledge, and there isn't. I mean, we can hold false beliefs. So I'd like to keep them separate.
But if you go where the evidence leads, then if that belief is proven to be false, then you should discard
Providing
it.
that the evidence itself is not faulty. For instance, there are people who believe the earth is flat, right? And they use evidence that they make up out of whole cloth to substantiate their beliefs and try to make it's pseudoscience, right?
But that's where Karl Popper comes in. And when
Right.
we try to find evidence, we shouldn't find evidence that supports our belief. We should
Right.
try to find evidence that disproves our belief.
Right.
And
That's the nature of the scientific method. It's not to
Yes.
find the self-fulfilling thing that proves me right, but to look at it and say, am I right or wrong? And that's the difference between good science and bad science, between chemistry and alchemy, if you will.
Yes, indeed.
But
Yes.
yes, but so next time we'll have to talk about the nature of evidence. That's the
Mhm.
only solution.
Yes. Well,
And-
we can
and-
do that.
But on that,
Because-
David, I love that you mentioned alchemy and chemistry, because listen, hang on to your seats, gentlemen. The fact is that I know that if it weren't for alchemy, we wouldn't have had chemistry. How's that? For a fact.
Same thing with astronomy and astrology, right?
Yep.
And we still look up at the stars and see, we still use mythology to find some of the star clusters and things like that. It doesn't mean that they're really, a dog star or, anything like that. But that's the difference between mythology and knowledge, right?
And that's but that's exactly my point. That as the evidence mounts, I mean, when Lavoisier started, he was a pioneer of chemistry, but chemistry is very firmly rooted in false beliefs that you could change urine into gold because urine is yellow, and therefore you can change urine into gold. But now, because of an accumulation and of factual, of empirical, not factual, of empirical observations, we've had to conclude that, regrettably, as far as we know, we can't change urine into gold because we know how things work. But
Wait a second, what am I going to do with my 30 gallons of urine now?
Exactly.
You can change it into sulfur.
We actually can change urine into gold and seawater into gold. It's just a case of getting enough of it. Anyway, guys, we've run out of time, and you know how strict I am about the hour because it's called the Hour Show. So we've got lots of material to do another time.
That's a belief that you hold.
Yes, it is. But I want to, because it's just a belief that I hold, I want to devalue it. I want to point out how monumentally insignificant it is that I hold that belief. So at the moment, we don't know who we've got on the show next week, but we will have someone. Anybody want to come back?
I'll come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
It's
okay.
the dance team of Scott and David. That's
Yeah.
Evidence. We want evidence for
Yeah.
that, please.
Yeah.
We
I
want
would like to talk more about evidence and how science leads to different kinds of conclusions.
Yeah. Before we go, I want to say I don't think there's any need for science to have been preceded by mythology. I don't think there was any mythology that went before Henri Becquerel's discovery of radiation, for example. Anyway, this is it. I'm having the last word. Here's our outro. Say goodbye, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.